I'm joined by Will Cain right now, a columnist for TheBlaze.com, also a CNN political contributor. Will, what do you make of Senator Cruz's speech today?
Well, look, Senator Cruz can give an amazing speech. I mean, he takes the highs, the lows, the passion, the humor. He responded well, ad-libbing versus those hecklers. But he also took some time to talk about his strategy, about keeping the shutdown going. Here's the deal, John. It's worth analyzing this strategy over and over again because I am one of these crazy conservatives who thinks the government shutdown actually isn't that big a deal when compared against the potential damage of expanding the government's influence in the healthcare market. But I also am someone who recognizes reality. Now, look, one NBC poll, is it the argument ender? I don't know. But it's apparent the American public doesn't agree with me, that this offset, at least right now, is not one they're willing to make as well. And if that's the case, the strategy isn't working.
He made quite a joke, really genuinely funny joke. Ted Cruz mentioned that he is one of many Republican senators going to the White House this afternoon to meet with the president. He said, if I don't emerge, if you don't see me, send a search and rescue party. He joked he might end up with a Syrian rebel somewhere. It's somewhat ironic, though, because you could make the case the last person in the world the White House wants to disappear right now is Ted Cruz. One could argue that Ted Cruz is doing the White House a lot of good right now.
If that NBC poll is really definitive, if it really describes where the American electorate is right now, and you suggest that Ted Cruz's positions over the last couple of weeks are responsible for that, then yeah, those hecklers should get out because this should let Ted Cruz continue to exert influence. Here's the thing, John, for guys like me, I agree with Cruz. I want him to accomplish his goals. I wish that he could, but it all hinged on one thing. This is what separated Ted Cruz from Paul Ryan. Not their conservatism, but rather, could you swing 5 Democratic senators? Could you force President Obama to decrease his own bill? It wasn't going to defund it, right? But rather push the individual mandate for a year. Could you force him to do it? And the only way to do that was to get the American public so on your side that President Obama and 5 Democrats had to respond, and that doesn't seem to be going well.
Does not seem to be going well at all. You brought up Paul Ryan. I do want to ask you about him in a second, but now I want to go to the floor there of the Value Voter Summit. Our Mark Preston has been there for the speech given by Senator Ted Cruz. He watched the heckling that was going on. Mark, I'm wondering if you can tell us exactly what happened, because it was a little bit hard to make it out here.
Sure, John. What we saw on the floor was no fewer than 7 times did we see people stand up and shout at Ted Cruz and ask him his stand on illegal immigration and why is he standing in the way of trying to create a pathway for citizenship for those that are here illegally. Now, they were roundly shouted down, and I've got to tell you, Ted Cruz is really a masterful technician when he's on the stage. He handled it very deftly, and in fact, he was able to turn that into a joke and say that, in fact, they were operatives for President Obama, which in turn got the audience very much involved and on his side. So at least 7 times he was stopped in the middle of his remarks. But Ted Cruz is this type of politician, John, that really does well in these types of environments. And in fact, he used it as fuel to try to build even more momentum behind his speech.
He talked a little bit about the end, or at least alluded to the shutdown debate going on right now and the debt ceiling debate. And he called on the House to stand firm. And that got quite a bit of applause there in that room, Mark.
Yeah, and again, what you and I talked about last hour is exactly what we expected to play out. Ted Cruz is in his element right now. While we're across town and Republican establishment types are trying to figure out a deal with President Obama, you have Ted Cruz here in front of 2,000 activists, conservative activists, that don't want to see a deal done. And I've got to tell you, you've got to give Ted Cruz, in some ways, a little bit of credit for having the hubris to say, I'm going to go to the White House right now after I'm done speaking, and if I don't come out alive, send a search and rescue team. That's quite a thing to say right before you meet the President of the United States, whether you like him politically or not. But again, another line that played very well in front of this audience here of these conservative grassroots activists, John.
All right, Mark Preston for us at the Value Voter Summit. Mark, we were joking, Will and I. He joked about a search and rescue team maybe disappearing at the White House, but it could be that the White House wants him very much around right now for what he's been giving them. Will, I do want to ask you about Paul Ryan, Congressman from Wisconsin, the Republican vice presidential nominee. He appears to have been instrumental in whatever movement there has been over the last 24 hours towards a possible debt ceiling deal. When you're talking about the wing of the party that's been cheering Ted Cruz at the Value Voter Summit, where I believe we will hear from Paul Ryan later today, will that hand that Paul Ryan has been reaching out to the White House, will that work for him or work against him? Is he playing with fire here when it comes to perhaps Tea Party voters?
Yeah, he might be. Look, I'll tell you honestly, I've seen Paul Ryan called a rhino, which I cannot...
Republican in name only.
Right, which I cannot wrap my mind around. Paul Ryan is as conservative as it gets. Now, does he agree with conservatives on every single issue, for example, on immigration reform? No, but he's as conservative as it gets unless you're requiring 100% agreement on every issue. And I can't imagine that we're maligning Paul Ryan and Ron Johnson. Can I tell you this? You have me on here telling you the flaws in this strategy, right? The flaws in the Ted Cruz strategy. Here's the best rebuttal. So if you had anybody, and if you could find somebody further to my right, here's the best rebuttal. Yeah, but what's your strategy? Ted Cruz's strategy might be bad, but what's the alternative strategy? That's the best rebuttal, and I think your question about Paul Ryan answers it. There might not be one that involves Obamacare.
Interesting. But Paul Ryan does have a strategy here, yes?
Yeah, it focuses on entitlement reform, tax reform, very important issues. Very, very important issues. But apparently, he says Obamacare is not off the table. He wants to include it, but he didn't mention it at first.
But just to reiterate, you are hearing already some complaints from the right, presumably, about what he is doing.
I've heard those complaints.
Will Cain, always great to have you here with us. Thank you so much. We got a lot left to talk about. We'll be right back.